Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Our first speaker today then is Mark Collier from Securelogix, speaking to call security and trust. Mark?
Thank you. I assume my slides are full screen and everybody can see them?
Yes, they are.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Again, my name is Mark Collier. I'm the Chief Technology Officer, or CTO, at Securelogix. And as said, I'm going to talk today about call security and trust, which basically means protecting public safety, government, and other organizations from malicious inbound calls, and also protecting outbound calls from public safety and government so that the public and customers actually answer calls. And before I leave this slide, I wanted to be sure to thank DHS S&T and the SBIR Program Office, as well as CISA ECD, who's worked with us quite a bit over the years and has resulted in a number of improvements to our solutions and even new products. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So the need addressed is that, as I show in the top of this little circle, public safety and government are attacked. Well, first of all, they have to process legitimate inbound calls from the public and customers, and they also make legitimate outbound calls to the public, maybe 911 callbacks, calls from law enforcement, etc. So that's the good news. The bad news is that bad actors sit in the middle and they generate issues such as robocalls that everybody's familiar with, Telephony Denial of Service, or TDoS, which is a flood of inbound calls designed for disruption, spoofing of numbers, and maybe even things like active shooter hoaxes, SWATing attacks, and possibly using AI and audio manipulation technologies such as deep fakes to make some of these calls and attacks more of an issue. They also make calls out to the public, and they might spoof 911, they might spoof a law enforcement organization, a part of the government, and the idea there is to trick them into participating in a scam, or maybe giving up information, or scaring them into doing something they shouldn't do. And the bottom line with that is that the public doesn't answer calls anymore that have unrecognized numbers, or even when a recognized label comes up, they're still hesitant to answer that call. So what we're trying to do is restore security and trust on inbound calls to public safety and government, and also protect their outbound calls. So the organizations that may benefit from this technology start with 911 and next generation 9-1-1, which is where a lot of emergencies are reported, if not all of them, and where really the first responder process starts. So that's really where we're focused. But our technology also works with law enforcement facilities, say a sheriff's office that might also get a SWATing call or robocalls and so on, municipal facilities, and also government. And lastly, DHS CISA ECD itself, who's working to define and implement how cyber security is provided for next generation 911 across the country. Now, some of the bad news is that right now, 911 and next generation 911 systems don't provide voice and communications security. You might have a firewall or some sort of other device that might help you with ransomware or something like that, but there's really nothing out there that provides the sort of communication security that I described, and I'll get into that in more detail later. There are standards out there from organizations such as NINA, but security, especially comm security, is not built into those specifications. And as I mentioned, traditional cyber security, firewalls, and so on, they do their job. They provide some protection, but not against the sorts of attacks I described. And lastly, with next generation 911, a major goal is to increase the use of text, images, and video, and those increase the attack surface. Bad actors are definitely going to take advantage of those forms of multimedia. So the requirements of the customer, including 911, public safety, law enforcement, municipal, government, etc., is to detect and mitigate various types of inbound voice and call attacks, such as telephony denial of service, which again is a flood of inbound calls that might keep call takers busy and unable to respond to a legitimate emergency call in a timely manner. Robocalls, spoofed calling numbers, and as mentioned, SWATing and active shooter hoaxes. You also want to help these organizations brand and spoof protect their outbound calls. And I'll talk about that more in a moment. But 911 callbacks and other critical calls from law enforcement, public safety, and government. And lastly, we want to provide security for other forms of communication beyond just voice, including text, audio, video, and images, which are part of next generation 911, and that our public customers expect to be able to communicate to public safety with. So a little bit about the solution. One of the things that we've done on a previous SBIR with DHS is we built a fully cloud capability that we've named Orchestra One that runs in Amazon Web Services and does not require any equipment or capability on the customer premise, meaning it's a lot easier to deploy, a lot easier to upgrade, and has a lot of other benefits. So Securelogix really has three basic applications. Those are all built into Orchestra One. And I'll start with what we call defense, which is our voice firewall and intrusion prevention system. And basically what it does is it monitors all inbound communications and looks for issues such as robocalls, telephony denial of service, spoofing, and other forms of malicious, and in some case, malicious outbound communications. Orchestra One also provides detection of spoofed calling numbers on inbound calls and also can authenticate the calling number strongly, which gives greater confidence that call taker or agent, et cetera, when they're answering calls. And then lastly, we also provide outbound security and trust, where we brand a call and do spoofing prevention so that the public and customers can confidently answer the call and not be tricked by spoofing. And lastly, I show one additional bubble in the upper right. Everything I've described thus far is in production, it's available. And one of the major things we've done on this SBIR is we've added similar capability to analyze video, images, text for inbound calls into next generation 911. So let me go through a few more slides on the solution. This particular slide talks about the branding and spoofing protection. So for an outbound call, let's say from a sheriff's office, what we'll do is we'll work with several vendors, AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, that handle, I would say, 95% of the calls to mobile devices. We work with them, and jointly we put up an up-to-date label or brand, as I show in the far right, such as 911 emergency. In some cases, we will put up a logo or even a reason for the call. The whole idea there is to encourage the public to actually answer the call, because most calls nowadays go unanswered. The other thing that we do is we tell in real time each of those same vendors a call is coming from, say, a law enforcement organization. We tell them it's coming, what the source and destination number is, so that when they see that call on the network, they know it's legitimate and they can confidently put up logo and other information. Conversely, if a bad actor spoofs their number and we have not attested or registered that call with these vendors, with these partners, they know it's spoofed and they'll maybe drop the call in the network or put up a fraud label to make sure that the public or customer doesn't answer that call. So again, the whole idea here is to get the public and customers to answer calls and not be victim of bad actors spoofing well-known numbers and tricking them into giving out information or otherwise doing things they shouldn't do. Quick architecture slide. We're working right now with Intrado, which is one of the largest call handling vendors in the industry, hoping to work with AT&T, and they would be directly querying in Amazon Orchestra One and taking advantage of all these services, including the firewall, IPS, our robocall list, allow deny list, and other capabilities. We're also working with some of the major service providers, including AT&T and Verizon, and we're plugging this solution into their network in a slightly different way. But at the end of the day, they'll be querying Orchestra One and providing a way to get to this capability without putting any equipment on premise, into a 911 center, public safety, law enforcement, et cetera. And one last slide, kind of blowing this up a little bit. You still have Orchestra One shown in Amazon Web Services, kind of in the middle, lower middle there. But in this case, what I'm trying to show is we're also building the capability in to do this more broadly, so that if a 911 or next generation 911 region wants to send all the data to one place and look for issues that are occurring over that region, or maybe even nationally, and displaying it in a dashboard, that's other work that we're doing here as well to support things like CISA ECD's CR911 concept, and this is also probably where the US DoD will be going. So let's take a look at some performance specifications. So our solution can detect TDoS attacks, and the key there is to distinguish the good calls from the bad calls. And if the bad calls are spoofed and intentionally made difficult to distinguish, a traditional data security solution that might say they can do TDoS detection, they flat out can't do that. They can't tell the good calls from the bad calls. And the benefit of doing that right is to accurately detect attacks, because you don't want to treat the wrong call as malicious. You have to be able to detect calling number. Sophisticated attacks virtually always have the calling number spoofed, like we see all the time on our mobile phones. So you have to be able to detect that, and then the benefit there is you can distinguish calls that are part of sophisticated attacks from legitimate calls. Need to be able to detect swatting calls and let call takers know. And of course, the benefit there is the sooner you let them know and let them know you believe it's a hoax, they can respond differently. And then lastly, I talked about multimedia. You need to detect malware and other issues in video, images, text, et cetera. And let call takers know that this is maybe malicious, or maybe it's just non-relevant. So don't make it a high priority. And if we compare that to some of the other solutions out there, first let's start with detecting TDoS attacks. Again, data security solutions might be able to say, hey, you're under TDoS attack, but they're not going to be able to tell you which calls are actually you're under TDoS attack. Technology like such as session border controllers, similar. And then our solution, as I've mentioned, can detect spoofing and other things and distinguish the legitimate calls from the malicious calls, so you can properly treat them. You have to be able to detect spoof calling numbers, because as I mentioned, sophisticated attacks almost always do that. Other solutions don't, we do. You need to be able to detect swatting, and data security and SBCs don't detect that. You need to be able to detect multimedia attacks. Traditional solutions don't dive into text and links and other information that you have in multimedia to detect malware, and especially analyze that content to see if it's even relevant, and that it should be something that a call taker should look at as a priority. And lastly, administrative systems, small sheriff's offices, small municipal facilities may use older technology. We do have a way of doing that, and of course, our real mission is to try to reach them with a cost-effective solution in the cloud. So just a few more slides. The current state of development is most of what I described is in production. The cloud-based solution will be GA in August, which is this month. And the multimedia solutions are probably about a TRL 6, and we'll put those into production in the future. So let me wrap with a Securelogix slide. So we've been doing voice and communication security for 20 years. I've described our applications. most of which are in production. We have broad deployments in public safety, DHS and government, and also the Department of Defense and Intelligence community. And we work very closely with Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, the major service providers. And we've also had a fantastic relationship over the years with DHS S&T and the SBIR program office. So what we like from a first responder engagement, again, our solutions are available now. We're working to make them more broadly available with major vendors. And we'd love to be, to work with the community to get some outreach, get our solutions described out there. We've got some opportunities to do pilots. And we also want to reach the community through these major programs such as CISA, ECD, CR911, and programs like that. So that concludes my presentation. Here's my contact info, and I'll turn it back to Chris for questions. Thank you.